we are hardwired with our DNA to resist change. It's a safety mechanism that our mind automatically resists change. So give yourself permission, it's okay. Now that we're empowered with that information, now what do we want to do with it?
Welcome to the Empower to Grow show, where we fuel your business journey with valuable insights and expert advice. I'm Kelly Brosna, the CEO and State Director of the New Jersey Small Business Development Center Network, and I'm thrilled to introduce our guest speaker for today's episode. Joanne Newborn is the CEO and founder of Newborn Evolution LLC. And Joanne is a certified executive leadership coach with a robust corporate background in business strategy, marketing, sales, team management, and corporate culture. She has successfully coached and trained individuals across various industries and organizations worldwide. Welcome, Joanne. Thank you for being on the show today, and I appreciate you taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor, and I have been to some of your events, and I have worked with you in the past, and so it's just a great honor to be here. I
well,
appreciate
it's wonderful, and in this time where it's like anything to beat the heat right now, right? So to be inside in a studio has been a wonderful thing. But tell us a little bit about why and how you started your company, and how did it all start?
Yeah, absolutely. I was in the corporate world for over 2 decades, and I was in sales and marketing. I did a lot of strategic planning, a lot of team building, and I had gotten my MBA late in life, which I really enjoyed. That gave a lot of context to what I was doing. And then I got into Jungian psychology just for fun. That's what I was doing. I was going to workshops all over the world. And my teachers kept asking me, do you want to get your coaching certification? And I kept saying, no, I'm really happy. And after 3 years, they convinced me to go ahead and get my certification. And I think they saw something in me that I didn't see, because immediately I started a passion project on the side of executive coaching. And I think between my MBA and then getting my coaching certification, I idealistically thought there's got to be like a perfectly run organization out there, and there just wasn't. Wherever I went, I would see the same sort of stumbling blocks, the same challenges over and over again. And then I became really passionate about wanting to help employees and organizations to be the best that they could be with all the knowledge that I had garnered. I didn't want to see those same mistakes being made over and over again.
And, to be the best we can, if people have sort of the drive, the dedication, the passion, right? But I'd like to take a step back, and maybe for the audience, what is executive coaching, and what type of individuals would come to you that would want executive coaching? Like, what is the outcome? What are they trying to achieve by going to executive coaching?
Absolutely. There's a lot of different things that they're trying to achieve. If an individual is coming to us, then they probably want to advance in their career, and they want to know, how do I get out of my own way? They might not even realize that they're in their own way.
For example, promotions? Is that what
they'd want to be promoted, or they might have a big vision for the future, and they just don't know how to get there. So what we do is, we really start with the vision, and then we put a business strategy together. You have to have both those hard and soft skills, and then work with the mindset, because a lot of times people are a little bit more afraid of success than they are of failure, and we just don't realize that.
Sure.
But then organizations come to us quite often. We see a lot of themes coming up right now. There's a lot of attrition going on. People are really struggling with time management. They don't know how to strategically think anymore, because that feeds into the time management, because we're just putting out fires all day long. So we really stress the importance of high performance teams and high impact teams, and also building leaders that can build those teams. So
you're looking at like the executive level, like CEOs, CFOs, COOs, Or do you see sort of the whole gamut, all types of positions within organizations?
It really is the whole gamut. I'm very passionate about leadership, and I believe that everyone is a leader, regardless if you're managing a team or not. But then it also filters down from senior leadership. So I think it depends in terms of the organizations. We really create everything with the organizations. So they might come in and say, well, we'd really like you to work with the CEO. We also work with some law firms. We might be working with, partners. But if the person themselves is not committed to it, then it's hard to do it. Then we might work with other areas of the organization that are affected by some of the things going on.
I suppose if the board of directors is telling you to work with the CEO, and the CEO might not necessarily think that he or she may need some coaching, I could see maybe a little resistance that come into play with that.
And if someone's not, on board with it, then we can coach you for years, and it's not going to make any change. You have to do the work yourself and make the changes yourself. I always say, you're the person driving the car, and we're the navigation system. We're just going to guide you to get there.
So you're the Tesla with the automated driving, that people can go. So what are the biggest struggles that you see of the individuals that come to you? Is it human capital? Is it, they can't get out of their own way? What are some of the biggest struggles that, or we'll just say sort of hoops that people need to get through in order to be success? And then I'd love to get your take on how do you gauge success? What is, I mean, obviously if somebody gets a promotion, that's clear, right?
Yeah.
But sometimes it's not as easy, cut and dry to look at that success. So let's go into what are some of the biggest struggles that people come and ask you to help with, and then how do you gauge success?
Yeah, but okay, let me start with one of the biggest things that we're seeing right now is the issue with attrition, and a lot of times organizations don't realize that they have a problem. They know that people are leaving, but they don't really understand the cost to the business. So the Port Authority had a great supplier diversity meet and greet a few months ago, and I was sitting down with the primes, and we were talking about, what kinds of challenges are you facing right now? And they were like, I don't think we're good. I don't think we have anything. And I said, well, how's attrition? Oh yeah, that's really bad. We just lost someone, and we had to turn down 3 government contracts because we lost one person. So I said, okay, let's just pause for a second. And I want you to think about the actual number of the revenue that you lost because you had to turn down 3 government contracts because you lost one person. And I just sat there quietly. I let them do the math, and the person's face lost all their color. And so that's what I meant. Sometimes they don't realize. So we want to help people get ahead of the problems before they're a major urgent emergency, but usually it comes after the fact. So again, a lot of organizations are asking people to be innovative and think strategically, but like I said, they're putting out fires all day long, and everything has the same importance. My phone, a text message goes off, an email, a phone call, a Slack message, and people have to really sort of think about what's really the priority. What are my goals? So what you were saying in terms of success, what are the goals? What is the vision of the organization? What am I trying to achieve today, this week, this month? And is this thing, whatever it is that just came in, can it wait till the end of the day? Can it,
But that's your time management piece,
That's
right?
the time management piece,
Yeah.
or prioritization. So that's another reason why people are coming to us, because they feel like their teams are just running around like chickens without heads, and they are, because they don't know, how do I stress the most important things, and how do I get everything done in the time that I have?
So when you're looking at the success part of it, so some of it may be to be proactive of looking at, okay, somebody just announced that they're leaving. What does this look like for my company with this one person gone? Do you help them with, do I need to replace this person? Or do we grow somebody from within? Or do you work internally with a company with that as well? I know you're coaching maybe the CEO or COO or whatever, but do you help with the organizational structure as well?
Not so much with the structure, but sometimes let's say they promote a lot of people very rapidly because they either acquired something or they're just amping up. We will help those people get up to speed. A lot of times they've just never managed before, so we help them with the managerial skills, the coaching skills. I said earlier when we were chatting, we just got a contract with the Library of Congress. So we're developing coaching versus managing. You know, we hear the word coaching thrown around a lot, and it happened at companies I worked for too. And people have to really know how to do that versus just replace the word management with coaching.
Well, and it's funny because what coaching means to me or management means to me may mean something totally different to somebody else. And we always talk about there's a difference between leading an organization and managing an organization. So what it sounds like to me is you're helping these individuals to lead.
Yes,
because
absolutely.
That's harder than managing. Managing is putting the fires out, right?
It's tactical.
Yes. Yeah. But leading is really getting them to that vision and looking at where do you see yourself in 3 to 5 years, whatever the time span people have.
Yeah.
So do you work with them on the vision statements and where they want to be? Yeah,
100%. I actually encourage the leaders of teams to create, first of all, I'm very passionate about vision, that people are really connected to the vision of their organization. Because a lot of times it's just nice words on a website or a piece of paper, and then I will say to the decision makers, I think we need to start with the vision of the organization, and they'll say, no, everybody knows it. Sometimes it's true, but a lot of times I'll ask a group of people, can anyone tell me what the vision of your organization is? And it's crickets, which is funny, but not funny. And once we dive into that, then I get people think about your team and the team's vision and how is that feeding into the vision of the organization and making sure all the teams are sort of funneling into that vision. Because what we end up seeing is a lot of business units and teams going in different directions and not being on the same page. So you don't have this nice flow up. You've got disjointedness going on. So it starts with the vision and what's the team culture? What's the vision? And does the team have say in where they're going as well? It's not just, you as a leader, you want to inspire people to be innovative, to speak up. That's a big issue too. I call it the risk aversion syndrome, where we're seeing employees at all levels of an industry too afraid to speak up. Even at the senior leadership level, they're afraid either they're going to be next to be let go, or this whole term of being canceled, right?
Sure.
They don't want to be canceled.
If they say something wrong, it's going to come back to haunt them. And
yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the environments that you work with. Mm-hmm. So, there are some companies that have a really great sort of a family environment, or it doesn't matter what size of the company, but there's also some that have that toxic environment. How do you coach and how do you mentor those leaders on fixing that? Because I know when we're working with businesses, one of the hardest things is changing that culture, changing that toxicity. And sometimes it's making the tough decisions of getting rid of the people that are the pot stirrers, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So how do you work with the businesses or the leadership? How do you work with them on fixing that culture?
Yeah, absolutely. We want to start with really having people think about what's in their control and what's out of their control, because there are going to be some things out of their control sometimes. So now once we have a good handle on what's
like the cousin of the owner of the company, where
and that I could tell you stories because I worked for family-run businesses. But now that we know what's in your control, now we can start to work with that and empower people with what we have and what can you do in this situation. And at some point, sometimes we do have to say, it's time to bring in an HR business partner. One of the leaders I'm coaching right now, he has a situation where, that's going on. But that is not usually the norm. It's like, how do you create that team culture on your team? How do you bring in leadership to your team? And then that can actually be a model for other teams, right? That if you can shine and you can show what you're doing best, and now you're collaborating with other teams, sometimes that toxicity will sort of be in the background then. So it's not about really coming in, because a lot of times people say, well, this is what's going on, fix it. And it's like, well, I love that this is called Empower to Grow, because we really want to empower people so these organizations can grow out beyond the toxicity.
Well, in some cases, I would assume that you're working, retirements are pending, right? I mean, it's what I see a lot of is sometimes, depending on the type of industry that you're working with, there's a lot of retirements. There's a lot of people that are ready, whether they have the age or the time or just the patience, whatever it may be. So it's about, when we talk about that empowerment side, how do you raise people up for that transition? And how do you work with the businesses on helping them make those transitions? Sometimes it's a forced retirement, sometimes it's a voluntary retirement.
Yeah.
But so do you help and work internally with those businesses to get them set up for transition? Because transition of leadership can be very scary to a lot of people, because they don't know what the next leader is going to be. So do you work with companies on that as well, with the transition?
Yeah, so we love to get way ahead of things like that. So we'll start with organization in terms of who's going to be next in line for your role if you get promoted or if you decide to leave. So they're already building leaders on their teams that will lead other leaders and giving them small ways to be able to head up the team. Even if it's just like, why don't we have someone new on the team lead the team meeting each week so they get a taste of that, right? So we start to plant those seeds early on. And then when these transitions happen, we really want to empower the teams. So what ends up happening with leadership is that we're all waiting for someone to tell us what to do, right? We're waiting for the leader to tell us what to do. And so we work with people so that they feel empowered to take the reins. So I've worked with a lot of people in different levels, and they say to me, I don't know if I could do this. And I'll say, why don't you put an agenda together before your new manager starts, this new person that's coming in, and it could be a very high-level person, and ask them for the meeting first when they have time. And you have an agenda that you want to talk about, and you're going to talk about your leadership style, and you want to find out what their leadership style is, and then you want to find out how you can best work with them. But you take the reins. Don't wait for them, because they're going to be overwhelmed. There's a lot they're going to be, trying to learn. And that's a really uncomfortable space for people to be in, because that's not the way people are used to working. We're used to waiting for my new boss to set up a meeting with me, and the results are tremendous when we sort of flip it on its head, because now the new leadership or the new person feels like they can really trust this person that's being super proactive, or an entire team.
That's awesome. And so to take a little bit of a step back on your role in your company that you're running, are you targeting specific industries, or is it all, or what are you seeing? What type of industries are using your executive coaching more than others? Is it technology? Is it pharma? Is it the mom and pops? Is it family-owned businesses? What type of industries in that you're working the most with, or you see an opportunity? Because obviously we want you to grow as well. So where's your growth path? And is it specific in industries? Is it demographics? Is it age? We talk about psychographics and demographics and all that. What is the best route for you to grow as well?
So we have two main areas, and then we go into other areas as well, because you've seen we've worked in a lot of different industries. We've been really lucky. We've worked in 50 countries around the world with over 100 companies since the company's been in existence for 6 years. But I came from the wine and spirits industry.
Okay.
That's where I spent 20 years of my
So
career.
everybody was happy, right?
It's actually has quite a downturn right now. So people aren't as happy. A lot of people are going towards non-alcoholic. We do executive forums every quarter. So we invite senior leadership to an hour forum where we talk about some of the biggest challenges, and that's a big challenge, right? People. They want a sense of belonging, and they're going towards mocktails versus a soda or an orange juice or something like that. So they actually have some big challenges now. But that's one of the areas that we work in, because that's our area of expertise. But we also work a lot in the government space as well. So
quite a difference between spirits and government.
What I have to say, what I have found is it doesn't matter the size of the company, the industry, the culture, the country that you're in. Every organization basically has the same challenges over and over again. It's mind-blowing.
So when you're looking at those differences, how do you pivot? How do you pivot to go from one industry? Because obviously leadership is going to be a little bit different in government work.
Yep.
It's very bureaucratic. You know, it is top down. There's policies, there's compliance, there's all of that. Obviously, in some of the private sector industries, and in particular spirits, it might be a little bit more autonomous. They're able to make decisions faster, right? So being in some of the government areas, I know how long it takes to make a decision, good, bad, or indifferent. So timing is really important, I would assume, especially when you're doing government work, because it takes a long time to transition somebody out. If you have an employee that, if you're coaching the CEO and you have an individual that is challenging, that is not helping move the company forward. Sometimes I had a coach at one point, and he was a CEO of a nonprofit, and he said sometimes you just have to let the people go. But that's easier said than done, because it takes a long time to let somebody go. So how long do you let that team feel the pain of the negativity versus a private sector where they might be able to make the decision much faster?
I would say we're very boutique in the way we work. So what's really important to us is that we co-create from the start to finish. So we don't usually say, well, we're going to pull this program out that we did before, and we'll repeat it. And
one size doesn't fit all.
And so we co-create from the beginning, and that's what we're doing right now with the Library of Congress. Is every single week we're on a call and we're co-creating. I'm a big fan of finding root causes, and we're not always fixing problems. We're also, I'm a big fan of continuous improvement as well, but we're really digging in so that we're speaking specifically to the industry that they're in, that we're speaking to their organization, and we're speaking to the exact challenges that we're having. Like I've had HR personnel come to me and say, well, we need a program on feedback. Our team can't give feedback. And I'll say, okay, but let's talk about this a little bit more. And I love to ask a lot of questions so that I really understand what's going on. And what we found out, or I mentioned before, they were promoting all these people really quickly that were kind of early on in their careers. They had never managed anyone before. And I said, well, what I'm really seeing is that people don't have the managerial skills that they need. Feedback is a symptom of the root cause. But if we did just a program on feedback, there's still going to be a lot of issues. So I think where we need to start are just the basic nuts and bolts of how to manage a team, and feedback is one piece of that. And they were like, oh yeah, we didn't think of that, you're right. So it's just important. Otherwise, it's almost like, you go to the doctor and then the doctor doesn't find out, and they're just like, here's a medication, take this, and it doesn't help the problem.
So when you're in these companies and you're working with these organizations, and are you putting together sort of a strategy for them to sort of like a roadmap
Yeah,
for them
so
to sort of follow?
we do a discovery phase, and then we do a strategy phase, and then we'll put together our recommendations from that. And once they decide where they want to go with it, then we co-create it together until implementation, and then we measure everything from the beginning. So once we start any kind of program, we start at the baseline of where we're at. Depending on how long the program is, we might do again midway, and then definitely again at the end, and then we'll put a whole strategic debrief together at the end so they can see the growth. They can see there are some things that can just be handed off to them of like, this is the next step for you to work on, and then other recommendations if they want to go further. A lot of our clients stay with us year on year.
So what is the average that you work with a business?
I've worked with, I have my company 6 years. I've had clients for 4.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, really so what we'll do is they'll usually come to us for something in particular, and then we'll work on that. And then they start to see how important the continuous improvement is. Like with the example of the attrition, if you can get ahead of that and you can start to work with the issues that might be going on before people start leaving, so they see the value in that. So we just go from program to program to, okay, this is the next area we need to work in, or this is what we're seeing out, the trends. Can you help us help the team to look at this in a new way? So we just keep going on to the next area of continuous improvement for them.
So you said you owned your company for 6 years. So you kicked it off right before COVID?
2018.
2018,
and
okay.
then, but the funny thing was I was still working full-time for the first couple of years. I had it as a passion project, and when I decided to leave was January 2021.
Okay.
And it was right in the middle of the pandemic, and people thought I was crazy. They're like, you have this great job with all these benefits. And sometimes you just have to listen to your gut instincts. And I didn't know what would happen, but I just felt like it was time. I was passionate about it. And the irony was, and I didn't know this, like during the pandemic, that's when executive coaching exploded. Companies really needed people. Everything went virtual. And like I said, we were working all over the world. So it's so important to also know your intuition and trust it.
Sure. Well, it sounds like, things are going in the right direction, so you made that right decision, And when I would assume that to build connections, it's a lot easier or faster to do it in person, when you're doing it virtual, but it sounds like you have a hybrid, so you can do both virtual. Do you do your initial sessions in person to sort of get to know people, build those rapports and relationships, and then perhaps you could do a few sessions virtual and then do a little bit of a hybrid, or?
It really depends on the organizations. That sometimes they just want to do all virtual, and sometimes they want to do it in person. So I really leave it up to them, their capabilities. Sometimes, it's a time factor. I mean, people usually go from meeting to meeting to meeting.
Sure.
But a lot more is opening up now. So I'm traveling a lot more. My team's traveling more. So it really depends. I feel like we're at a sort of a 70-30, 70% virtual, 30% in person, and that sometimes the organization has to do with their budgets. Like,
sure.
If I'm on a virtual, let's say, group coaching session or a workshop, I could have people from 5 different companies in it that all work for the same organization, and they don't need to pay that travel for
Sure.
them to get there.
No, there's definitely some cost savings, I would assume, but I go back to, I know when we're building teams and you're trying to build those relationships and camaraderie, it's a heck of a lot easier doing it in person than it is to do on Zoom, because, I don't know if you get this, but sometimes I have to remind people, please put your video on,
all the time.
or it's easier, and I'm curious as if you ran into some of this, is that it was easier during, 100% virtual to not be so kind to each other, because there wasn't really a whole lot of consequences. You could not be nice And there really wasn't any, you didn't have to see the person. You didn't have to see that you hurt them or you offended them or whatever. But, and I just sort of found sometimes that you had to remind people that we are still all humans and you have to be nice and kind. And so, but that's easier to do when you're in person than when you're virtual.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see, did you run into any of that when you're doing your virtual?
You might need one of our programs. No, I'm kidding.
Oh, I'm sure I probably do.
So I would say the magic definitely happens in the room. I mean, it's such a different kind of energy, and people really need that to form those bonds and connections and collaborate. I did not experience people not being kind to each other, but I did experience a disconnect.
Okay.
So like you said, it's easy to just have your camera off. And culturally, that was very interesting. Depending on, there were some countries that I worked with that their culture was, we don't turn on our cameras.
Oh, interesting.
And that was okay. So if I was asking them, that wasn't the norm. It was really interesting. But that caused a big disconnect between people. And so companies were really complaining about people working in silos and how do we collaborate with cross-functional teams. And I would say the unkindness was more between teams, right? That they were becoming combative with each other.
Was it a competition or was it?
Different priorities.
Okay.
Oh, you need me to do this, but my stuff's more important and we're not going to help you.
Not my job description?
Not my circus, not my monkeys.
There you go.
I say that a lot. But there were some organizations where it's almost most organizations, the workflows usually don't just stay siloed with one group. Then the other people need to execute it or other people need to weigh in on it. So also showing them how powerful it is when you can collaborate with other teams. And I don't know if you've heard the term matrix model management. So a lot of organizations during the pandemic went that way, which sort of took teams and flipped it on its head. So they would take a team lead from one particular team, and then they would put people from all different business units on one team, sort of forcing them to work together.
So kind of cross-pollinating skills.
Except the person who was leading the team did not manage the other people, right? They might manage a couple of people. So it was a whole new skill set of how to influence without authority. So we were doing a lot of that with, really showing them how you can influence people without authority. And then, you don't need the matrix model to do that. You can learn those skills and then be able to work with the other teams.
Did you find yourself while somebody hires you to coach, and let's just say you're coaching the CEO, and then all of a sudden you realize it's really not the CEO that needs the coaching. It might be some of the management level. Do you ever see where you've had to pivot to perhaps maybe go to a different individual or go different department or whatever? Does that happen?
I think, we have to have the conversations with the organization to say, okay, we've discovered this and some of the accountability is lying here. And then again, because we work so closely with the organizations, ask them, what would you like to do about it? So we're actually dealing with something like that right now where what can't happen is organizations can't say, we want a coach to come in to sort of be our HR department and, do disciplinary action or force someone to do something that they're not doing. And sometimes that happens. And that to me is an accountability issue. The organizations or the departments or the managers have to have that accountability. Then we can come in and work, but everybody has to be on the same page.
So what keeps you up at night?
Ooh,
what keeps you up at night and what drives you? What keeps you going?
Let's see. I'm going to start with what drives me because I love what I do. I love waking up in the morning. I have a team of people that work with me now, and I'm laughing because I hit some of the same stumbling blocks that we do with organizations, and that probably keeps me up at night when I start, now as my team is growing, I practice everything that I preach. So those are hard conversations, and I think it's probably more difficult for the person to have a difficult conversation with an employee as it is for the employee to be on the receiving end. So I think those things keep me up at night because because I've worked for organizations also that, they might be a coaching organization, but they're internally a mess. And I don't want to be that, right? I want to be the pinnacle of what people look up to. When I had this idealistic vision of, my MBA and my coaching certification of there has to be a perfect organization out there. So that keeps me up at night. But passionately, I just love working with people and organizations, and the mindset piece is so important too. And so I always like to fold pieces of that in there. Like, for example, when we're talking about change management is such a big part of what we do. And the first thing I say to people is, did you know that we are hardwired with our DNA to resist change? It's a safety mechanism that our mind automatically resists change. So give yourself permission. It's okay. Now that we're empowered with that information, now what do we want to do with it? And I almost feel people have a collective sigh of relief, oh, it's okay to resist change.
Yeah. Well, I think, and we all know this, that the hardest thing for somebody to do is change.
Yeah.
Right. So that getting over that hump, I think, is probably, or at least letting people recognize that it's like that aha moment. I'm like, oh, I didn't realize that it's not you, it's me, and that hesitation of going into that. But, I love the idea, and I think that for this show, we talk about, it's about storytelling. It's about making sure that our audience sees the opportunities and the resources that are available to them. So as we sort of try to wrap up the conversation, which has been a lovely conversation.
Thank you. Same.
I'd love to hear give us your success story. Give us, tell us a story of one of an achievement that you made with your company that you're really proud of, that again keeps you going, keeps that drive going, keeps that passion, of you wanting to help others. And obviously you're in that mode. You're helping not just businesses, but you're helping people. You're helping people to recognize, and it's not just the deficiencies, but also the opportunities, of where are those. So I'd love to just, part of that storytelling, tell us, you don't have to say the name of the company, but the type of company, the industry, and why you're so proud that you were able to help this organization.
Thank you for asking that question. My mind is racing. I'm like, oh, there's so many.
I know, it's nothing on the script.
Oh, no, there's so many great, beautiful stories that I could tell about things like transformations that people had. But there was one that really stands out in my mind, and they worked in the government space, but they weren't a government agency. And so I was in person with them, and we were doing a 2-day workshop on being a successful manager and these management skills. And a lot of times when you're in the room with leaders that are taking this, they start having conversations that they should be having with each other, not in the course itself. But I really want to leave the space for it because I think some of those discussions are so important. And the discussion really went to diversity and females in the organization and females of color in the organization. And sometimes, you're a safe space, like I'll be a safe space, or someone on my team creates a safe space where someone who never felt that they could speak up about something that is, a delicate subject feels like I can do that in this space. And that's what happened. And we ended up having this very lengthy conversation about how the organization itself needed to change because they were not empowering women of color in the organization. And they had thanked me so much because even though what we were there for wasn't about that, that was like a game changer for them as an organization. So I love these things that kind of happen organically, but they have permission now to be able to move in that direction.
And that's amazing. And I'm sure the individuals as well as leadership appreciated that, because sometimes it might be staring you right in the face, but you don't recognize it until it's pointed out to you.
And sometimes those conversations are happening at the water cooler, or they're happening somewhere else, but they're not happening in the room where they need to happen.
Yeah. So it sounds like, and just to wrap this up, that you're able to not only, help the leadership and the executive leadership, but also drilling down into the company, that you're able to provide individuals with voices to be able to help them. And if they're successful, the higher uppers are going to be successful as well in helping with that sort of team building, camaraderie, and again, to distill that passion onto all employees within. It doesn't matter if it's a 10-person company or a 500-person company, although more people might be more challenging to get them all on the same page. But I want to thank you. Thank you for the conversation, and thank you for providing information to our audience that I think people might really be considering looking at coaches, and there's an opportunity there. And I was, the old saying that you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Well, that's not true. You can still tap into your inner self on different avenues that you might not have considered. And that's how I look at this. I look at this as your ability to open the mind, open people's minds of different ways that they could approach things that maybe they didn't consider before.
Yeah, that's such a great point. And the answers are always inside of us. We just have to get out of our own way, or move some stuff out of the way so that we can actually see the answers. So you touched upon that, and it's so perfect.
Well, that's wonderful. Well, and I want to thank you today for being here, Joanne, and sharing us with Joanne Newborn, the CEO and founder of Newborn Evolution LLC. So thank you, Joanne, for being here today.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you and everything that you do.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for tuning in to the conversation today with Joanne. And to support this podcast, please subscribe and visit us at NJSBDC.com for no-cost small business consulting, training, and resources. Remember, we are here to empower you every step of the way. So see you next time.